Chapter 1, The Silent System. The stars of the uncharted system burned cold and indifferent, scattered across a black canvas that seemed to stretch forever. Humanity's battered fleet hung in the void, engines muted, hulls scarred from the ambush they had just executed. The wreckage of hegemony warships was light years behind them, but the memory of the carnage lingered like smoke in the minds of every officer aboard. Admiral Voss stood at the command dais of the Resolute, his eyes fixed on the tactical hologram. The fleet's formation was tight, disciplined, yet every vessel carried the exhaustion of crews who had fought, killed, and survived against impossible odds. 6 hours of reprieve had been granted, but the reprieve was fragile. He knew the hegemony would not forgive humiliation. Status reports, Voss said, his voice calm, clipped. Commander Rhea leaned forward from her console, her tone precise. Jump drives are stable. Hull integrity across the fleet ranges between 70 and 90%. Ammunition reserves are low, torpedo bays at 40%, railgun slugs at 50%. Laser capacitors are recharging, but the smaller frigates will need another 2 hours before they're combat ready. Voss nodded once, and morale, Rhea hesitated, then answered. Hi, they know we bloodied the hegemony. They know we can hurt them. The Admiral's gaze swept the hologram. They also know retaliation will be merciless. Prideful empires don't tolerate humiliation. The hegemony will send capital fleets, not patrol squadrons. They'll want to erase us from history. Silence followed, heavy and unyielding. Officers exchanged glances but said nothing. They all understood the stakes. Humanity's fleet was small, a shadow compared to the vast armadas of their enemy. Yet shadows had teeth. Voss broke the silence. We will not meet them head-on. We will not die in a glorious stand. We will bleed them, confuse them, force them to chase ghosts. Every strike we make will remind them that arrogance is a weakness. The words carried weight. They were not a speech, not a rallying cry, but a doctrine. Humanity's survival depended on it. A sensor officer spoke suddenly, breaking the tension. Admiral, long-range scans show faint energy signatures on the system's outer rim. Could be natural anomalies or concealed infrastructure. Rhea's eyes narrowed. Uncharted system. No records of settlements. If it's infrastructure, it's either abandoned or hidden. Voss's jaw tightened. Or it belongs to the hegemony. The hologram shifted, magnifying the faint readings. The signatures were weak, intermittent, but they carried a rhythm that suggested artificial origin. Options, Voss asked. Rhea responded without hesitation. We send a recon wing, fast frigates, minimal profile. If it's hostile, they withdraw before contact. If it's salvageable, we secure it. We need resources. Voss considered. Agreed, but no mistakes. If the hegemony has a listening post here, we cannot afford to alert them. The order was given. 2 frigates detached from the fleet, engines whispering as they accelerated toward the unknown. The rest of the fleet remained in silence, waiting, watching. Minutes stretched into an hour. The tension was palpable, every officer aware that discovery could mean annihilation. Then the recon wing transmitted back. Admiral, we found it. Derelict station, massive but lifeless. No power signatures beyond residual radiation. Hull markings not hegemony, unknown origin. The bridge erupted in murmurs. Unknown origin meant possibility. Technology, resources, perhaps even weapons. Humanity's war was fought with scraps, stolen designs, and desperate improvisation. A derelict station could change everything. Transmit visuals, Voss ordered. The hologram flickered, revealing the station, a colossal structure adrift in the void, its architecture alien, angular, and scarred by centuries of neglect. It was not hegemony design, too sharp, too brutal, too alien even for them. Rhea whispered, what the hell built that? Voss's eyes narrowed. Doesn't matter, what matters is what's inside. The recon wing reported further. Docking bays intact, atmosphere unstable but present. No signs of automated defenses. It's dead, Admiral. Voss turned to his officers. We move, secure the station, strip it for anything useful. If it holds technology we can adapt, it becomes our advantage. If it holds nothing, it becomes our hiding place. The fleet stirred, engines ignited, hulls gliding through the void toward the derelict. The silence of the system was broken by the hum of human warships converging on a relic of forgotten war. As they approached, Rhea leaned closer to Voss. You realize the risk. If this station belonged to another empire, one older than the hegemony, we could be walking into a graveyard with teeth. Voss's reply was cold, unwavering. Every battlefield is a graveyard. The difference is whether we leave it alive. The fleet closed in, shadows against the alien station. Docking clamps extended, boarding parties prepared. Humanity's soldiers, weary yet resolute, armed themselves for exploration. The first boarding teams entered. Their transmissions came through, voices steady but edged with awe. Interior is vast, corridors stretch for kilometers. Signs of battle, damage, scorch marks, collapsed bulkheads, no bodies, no movement. It's empty. Rhea studied the feed. Empty doesn't mean safe, keep them sharp. Then came the words that shifted the atmosphere entirely. Admiral, we found something. Central chamber. Massive core structure. It's not dead, it's dormant. The bridge froze. Dormant meant potential. Dormant meant danger. Voss's eyes locked on the hologram of the alien station, its silent bulk looming over his fleet. He spoke with the same calm that had carried humanity through every impossible battle. Wake it carefully. If it's a weapon, we'll wield it. If it's a trap, we'll break it. Either way, it belongs to us now. The order was given. Humanity's fleet prepared to breathe life into a relic of forgotten war, unaware of the storm it would unleash. And far beyond the silent system, the hegemony armadas were already mobilizing, their vengeance burning brighter than any star. The boarding team's boots echoed off the polished obsidian floor of the central chamber, the only sound aside from the low, rising hum emanating from the obelisk at the room's center. Corporal Jax Mares kept his rifle raised, his left hand resting on the pulse grenade clipped to his chest rig, the scar across his jaw pulling tight as he scanned the chamber's perimeter. No bodies, no signs of recent habitation beyond the faint scorch marks marring the lower walls, just the core, 12 meters of iridescent violet alloy, pulsing faintly now that the team was within 20 meters. Bridge, this is lead actual, Mares said, his voice low enough to avoid picking up on the core's growing hum. Core is active, low power output, no defensive triggers, no movement from any internal systems beyond the glow, requesting guidance on interface protocol. On the UNSC Wayfarer's bridge, Ria Vasquez tapped her console, pulling up the live feed from the team's helmet cams. Her fingers flew as she cross-referenced the core's energy signature with the fleet's database, her knuckles white. Admiral, the signature matches the residual trace we picked up at the Procyon relay 3 months back. The one that fried the Icarus and Vanguard before we could get a targeting lock. Voss didn't take his eyes off the tactical hollow, where the alien station loomed large between his destroyer screen and the empty void beyond. The fleet held position 50 clicks out, all spinal batteries trained on the station's hull, point defense systems humming at ready. Hegemony tech markers, he asked, his voice as flat as the hollow's surface. Negative. Isotope dating on the bulkhead plating puts this station at 2,200 years old, predates hegemony expansion by at least 8 centuries. It's not theirs. Mares took a step closer to the core, his squad fanning out behind him. Talai Rook, the team's tech specialist, knelt at the base of the obelisk, running a multispectral scanner over a console etched with twisted, constellation-like glyphs. Lead, this is tech, she said, her voice tight with concentration. There's a biometric interface here. It's not keyed to any human or hegemony genetic profile in our database. It's waiting for a specific access sequence, something tied to the species that built it. The station lurched. The thrum spiked into a low, resonant vibration that rattled the bolts in the chamber's ceiling, sending a shower of dust down onto the squad's armor. The core's violet glow flared bright enough to cast sharp shadows across the walls, then dimmed to a steady, fast pulse. Mares's rifle snapped up, his squad locking their aim on the obelisk. Status, he barked. It's not attacking. Rook's voice cracked slightly as she stared at her scanner. It's handshaking. It picked up our comms signals, our biosignatures, running a full diagnostic. Wait, oh hell, lead, it just uploaded a data packet to our comms array. It's a star chart and a countdown. On the bridge, Ria's console blared a priority alert. She pulled up the uploaded file, her face draining of color. Admiral, that's the hegemony home system. And those marked points are their primary weapons caches, fleet yards, command hubs. The countdown is 72 hours. It's an arming sequence for a sector-wide broadcast beacon. If this thing completes its cycle, every hegemony fleet within 10 light years will get a ping that we're here. They'll mobilize before we can get back up from Earth. Voss's jaw tightened, but his tone didn't waver. Can we shut it down remotely? Ria shook her head, tapping a sequence into her console. Negative. The handshake locked out all external access. Only a physical connection at the core's base will override it, but the interface is rigged to detonate the station's core if the wrong access sequence is entered. Blast radius is 400 clicks. That takes out the Wayfarer, the Aegis, and the 3 corvettes on picket duty. Mares stared at the console at the core's base where the countdown now glowed red, 71:58:12. He keyed his comms directly to the bridge, bypassing the squad channel. Admiral, this is Mares. Rook's already decoded half the glyphs. We can make the interface work, but we need a direct line to your Xenotech team. If we mess up, we go up with the station. If we don't, we get the hegemony's entire operational map, and we stop their armada from mustering before they can reach this system. Voss's eyes flicked to the boarding team's feed, then to the hollow, where 3 unfamiliar warp signatures had just appeared at the system's edge. He didn't hesitate. Ria, patch Mares through to Lab Team 3. Corporal, you have 71 hours. Don't die. As Ria typed the command, the first of the new warp signatures resolved into the sharp, angular silhouette of a hegemony dreadnought, its lance batteries glowing hot blue as it cleared the warp bubble. The second and third followed close behind, their drives flaring as they adjusted course for the human fleet. The Wayfarers' klaxons blared so loud they vibrated through the deck plating, red emergency strobes painting the bridge crew's faces as Tactical Officer Lieutenant Kale barked contact counts. 3 hegemony dreadnoughts, Admiral. Designations HSS Varkas, HSS Kelthas, HSS Vorath. Lance batteries charged to 92%, missile tubes cycling. Holding at 120,000 clicks, no course changes. Admiral Voss didn't flinch, his eyes fixed on the hollow where the 3 angular, spined silhouettes hung against the black of space, their blue lance glows pulsing like angry stars. Battle stations across the fleet. Hold fire, do not provoke them. Aegis corvettes form a defensive screen around the station. If that core detonates, the blast takes out half my fleet and those 3 dreadnoughts before anyone can get a shot off. On the station's core access deck, sparks rain from a fractured conduit bank above Mears's head, the acrid smell of burnt insulation thick in the recycled air. The countdown on the core interface glowed harsh red, 71:55:12, ticking down 1 second at a time. He crouched behind a pitted blast shield, carbine propped on the edge, his 2 Marines, Corporal Jensen and Private Lyra, positioned at either corridor entrance, rifles trained on the bulkheads. Rook was still hunched over her decoder, glyphs scrolling so fast across her wrist comp they blurred into streaks, her brow furrowed so deep it pulled the scar across her left cheek taut. Ria's voice crackled over the open comms, staticky with interference from the station's damaged relay. Patch to Lab Team 3 is live, Dr. Hale is speaking. Mares, the Xenotech lead's voice was sharp, no wasted syllables. We have the override schema. Sequence requires 3 glyphs in descending hegemony command rank, Subcommander, Fleet Commander, Imperial Overlord. Rook's decode has to be perfect. 1 wrong glyph triggers the core's anti-tamper detonation. Blast radius holds. You have 71 hours. Don't screw this up. Back on the bridge, the lead dreadnought HSS Varkas opened a comms channel, the hegemony High Exarch Vorax voice distorted by the universal translator, cold and nasal. Human command, surrender the research station and all Xenotech data stored within, and we will grant you a swift death. Refuse, and we will reduce your capital ships to debris before your fighters can clear their bays. Voss's jaw tightened, but his tone didn't waver. We have personnel actively working on the station's core. Any attack on the station will trigger a 400-kilometer antimatter blast that will destroy your dreadnoughts as well as our own. Stand down or we all die, Vorak barked a harsh laugh. You lie, we hold the core's dead man switch. If your team attempts an override, it detonates. You have 9 minutes to surrender before we open fire. On the station deck, Rook yelled without looking up from her comp. Decode complete. Sequence is glyph of the subjugated star, glyph of the fleet's maw, glyph of the eternal throne. Input in order, no mistakes. Mares pushed off the blast shield, his carbine slung across his back, and moved to the core interface. His pulse thrummed in his jaw, a familiar rhythm from a dozen high-risk boarding runs, but his hands were steady. He tapped the first glyph into the touchscreen, interface flashed bright green, second glyph, another green flash. He heard the distant thud of plasma fire hitting the corridor wall outside, Jensen yelling as he returned fire. He tapped the third glyph. The interface beamed once, loud enough to cut through the distant gunfire. The red countdown froze, then faded to soft blue. A high-pitched whine built for 3 seconds, then cut off. A data stream icon popped up on Rook's wrist comp, 100% transfer to Wayfarer mainframe. Got it, Rook breathed, slumping back for half a second before she grabbed her sidearm. On the bridge, Voss leaned forward as the hollow populated with the hegemony operational map. 17 fleet wings, 127 capital ships, staging at the Zeta Reticuli jump gate, ETA 62 hours to the human outer rim colony of Epsilon Eridani. He keyed the fleet-wide comms, his voice sharp and clear. All hands, we have the intel. Target the lead dreadnought's lance emitters. Fire at will. Blue lance bolts streaked across the void from the Wayfarer and Aegis, slamming into the Varkas' forward weapon mounts, exploding in showers of molten alloy. The 3 corvettes broke formation, darting forward to launch salvos of anti-ship missiles at the second dreadnought, Kael'thas. The Varkas returned fire, a lance bolt slamming into the Aegis' forward shields, making them flicker so bright they washed out the bridge's screens for half a second. Then the corridor outside the core chamber exploded. The blast shield Mares had left shuddered under the impact, sparks showering down as hegemony borders and matte black power armor poured through the breach, plasma fire sizzling past his head. Jensen yelled as a bolt took him in the shoulder, crashing to the deck. Lyra popped up from cover, firing controlled bursts, dropping 2 boarders before a plasma round caught her in the chest, her body slumping against the wall. Mares grabbed his carbine, popping up to fire 2 bursts that took out 2 more boarders, the rest taking cover behind the corridor's wrecked equipment. He keyed his comms to the bridge, his voice tight. Data's transferred. Core override is stable. I need a strike fighter at my position now. 2 minutes out, Voss's voice came back, calm over the sound of distant explosions. "Hold on, Corporal." Mares ducked as a plasma bolt slammed into the console next to him, melting the edge of the interface. He fired back, his mag down to 12 rounds. Outside the viewport, the fleet clash raged. Lance bolts crisscrossed the void, missile trails streaked toward the hegemony dreadnoughts, the Vorath turning to fire a full broadside at the Wayfarer's stern shields. The countdown on the frozen core interface glowed soft blue, the only quiet thing in the chaos. Word count, 972. Chapter 4, Inferno's edge. The Aegis trembled under another broadside, the deck plates vibrating as if the ship itself were growling back at the hegemony dreadnought. On the bridge, Voss's voice cut through the chaos, steady and surgical. "Helm, yaw 3 degrees starboard. Gunnery, lock the Vorath's ventral batteries. Fire as soon as you have solution." The crew moved with precision, no wasted motion, no panic. Outside, the void was alive with streaks of light, lance bolts, missile contrails, and the incandescent glare of shield impacts. The human fleet was outnumbered, but every maneuver was calculated to bleed the enemy's arrogance dry. The Vorath loomed across the battle space, its hull bristling with weapon emplacements, its shields shimmering under the relentless pounding from the Wayfarer and Sentinel. The hegemony had committed 3 capital ships to crush the humans, confident in their superiority. Yet the Aegis held the line, its battered shields refusing to collapse. "Status on Mares?" Voss asked, eyes never leaving the tactical display. "Still holding," came the reply from comms. "Strike fighter inbound 90 seconds. Voss nodded once. 90 seconds was an eternity in a boarding fight. He knew Mares would either be dead or a legend by then. On the lower decks, Mares fired another burst, the recoil hammering against his shoulder. The corridor was a furnace of plasma bolts and ricochets. The hegemony boarders advanced with mechanical precision, their armor absorbing glancing hits, their weapons cutting through bulkheads like paper. "Jensen, stay down," Mares barked, dragging the wounded soldier behind cover. Jensen's face was pale, blood soaking through his shoulder plate. "They're pushing hard," Jensen rasped. "Not for long." Mares slammed a fresh mag into his carbine, the click echoing like a promise. The boarders surged again, plasma bolts tearing chunks from the blast shield. Mares dropped 2 with controlled bursts, but more filled the gap. He glanced at the core interface, 30 seconds until the override locked. If they lost it now, the ship's systems would fall to hegemony control. Above, the fleet clash reached a crescendo. The Vorath unleashed a full spread of plasma torpedoes, each glowing like miniature suns. Aegis's point defense batteries spat streams of fire, detonating half the incoming warheads, but the rest slammed into the shields, forcing them down to a dangerous flicker. "Shields at 20%, the tactical officer shouted. "Divert auxiliary power from life support," Voss ordered without hesitation. "We breathe thin air or we die, keep those shields up." The crew obeyed, oxygen levels dropping across the ship. No one complained. The Wayfarer swung in, its broadside hammering the Vorath's flank. Explosions rippled across the alien hull, but the dreadnought's return fire was merciless, tearing into the Wayfarer's stern. "Wayfarer's shields collapsing," the sensor officer reported. "Tell them to roll and expose fresh plating," Voss said. "We'll cover their retreat." The Aegis's lance batteries fired in unison, beams slicing across the void, gouging molten scars into the Vorath's armor. The alien ship shuddered, its arrogance meeting the cold reality of human resolve. Back in the corridor, Mares ducked as a plasma bolt vaporized the console beside him. He fired back, his last rounds dropping another boarder. His mag clicked empty. "Out," he snarled, tossing the weapon aside. He drew his combat knife, the blade gleaming in the flickering light. The first boarder lunged, plasma rifle raised. Mares sidestepped, driving the knife into the gap between armor plates, twisting hard. The alien collapsed, sparks spraying from its suit. Another came at him, and Mares ripped the fallen rifle free, firing point-blank into the attacker's chest. The corridor filled with smoke and screams. Then the strike fighter arrived. The deck shook as its cannons roared, plasma bolts shredding the boarders in a storm of fire. Armor cracked, bodies fell, and the corridor was suddenly silent except for the hiss of cooling metal. Mares leaned against the wall, chest heaving, knife still in his hand. Jensen groaned, alive but barely. "Core override locked," the interface announced in a calm, synthetic voice. Mares keyed his comms, bridge, boarders neutralized, core secure. On the bridge, Voss allowed himself a single breath of relief, acknowledged hold position, but the battle outside was far from over. The Vorath, wounded but not broken, turned its massive hull, preparing to unleash another broadside. The human fleet was stretched thin, every ship bleeding power and lives. Voss studied the tactical display, his mind cold and clear. The hegemony believed brute force would break humanity. They were wrong. "Helm," he said, voice steady, "bring us into knife range. Gunnery, prepare all batteries. We're going to gut that dreadnought." The crew obeyed without hesitation. The Aegis surged forward, shields flickering, weapons charging. The Vorath loomed ahead, its arrogance about to meet the relentless fury of human steel. The void burned with light as capital ships locked in their deadly inferno, each shot a gamble, each maneuver a razor's edge. Humanity had no margin for error, no room for retreat. And yet in the silence between impacts and the calm of Voss's voice, there was something the hegemony could never understand, an unyielding will that turned desperation into victory. The Aegis closed the distance, its guns ready. The next exchange would decide everything. The deck shuddered as the Aegis's maneuvering thrusters fired in rapid staccato bursts, dodging a corvette's stray laser salvo that seared the void where their port bow had been 3 seconds prior. Ozone bit at the air, thick with the acrid tang of burnt insulation, and the faint, coppery smell of blood from the engineering teams still patching shield generator breaches below decks. Petty Officer Ray's knuckles were white around the helm yoke, her jaw tight as she fought the ship's inertial drift, the tactical display in front of her flashing warnings every time a Voreth projectile grazed their outer hull. Shield generators reporting 22% capacity, all sectors, the damage control officer called out, his voice flat over the comms loop, no trace of the panic the Voreth would have expected from a crew cornered in deep space. On the bridge, Voss's uniform was singed at the collar, a thin cut oozing blood down his forehead from shrapnel that had clipped the viewport 10 minutes prior. He didn't bother wiping it away, his eyes fixed on the main tactical display. The Voreth dreadnought loomed large, its jagged obsidian hull pocked with fresh impact craters from the Aegis's opening volley, its escort screen of 6 corvettes swarming at the fleet's flank, harrying the destroyer's roughneck and vanguard that hung back to cover the carrier Indomitable, now venting atmosphere from its starboard flight deck, shields at a critical 11%. "They're holding fire on the escorts," the tactical officer muttered, tapping his screen to pull up the Voreth's weapon's signature. "Spinal mount charge is at 64%, Captain. They're saving everything for a single shot to our core." "Let them," Voss said, his voice steady, no tremor of fear. He keyed his comms to the gunnery pit. "Kowalski, give me firing solutions on their forward shield emitters. Prioritize the port side cluster. Their escorts are drawing fire from our destroyers. They can't spare the power to reinforce it." "Acknowledged, Captain." Gunnery Chief Kowalski's gravelly voice came back, her cybernetic eye whirring as she cross-referenced the Aegis's firing data. "Railguns charged, point defense locked. Window for clean hits is 12 seconds before their spinal mount tops off." The Aegis rolled hard to port, inertial dampeners screaming as the crew fought to stay upright. A Voreth corvette broke formation, lunging for the Aegis's exposed stern, only to be blown apart by a salvo from the Vanguard's rear batteries, its debris scattering across the sensors. "Fire," Voss ordered. The Aegis's forward battery lit up, railgun slugs streaking across the void faster than the eye could track, slamming into the Voreth's port shield cluster in a cascade of brilliant blue-white sparks. The dreadnought's shield flared, then flickered, collapsing entirely under the sustained barrage. Alarms blared on the Voreth's bridge. Voss could see the faint, panicked movement of their crew through the long-range sensors, their arrogance cracking as they realized the humans hadn't come to negotiate, hadn't come to surrender after their earlier demand for unconditional capitulation. They'd come to gut them. The Voreth returned fire a second later, its spinal mount laser charging to full in a burst of violet light that seared the void. The bolt slammed into the Aegis's starboard shield, sending a shockwave through the deck that threw 2 crew members against the bulkhead. The bridge bathed in harsh red as the damage control alarms wailed. "Starboard shield collapsed," the damage control officer shouted. "Engineering compartment 3 breached, 2 casualties, auxiliary power rerouted to forward shields. Current shield capacity, 17%. Voss didn't flinch. He watched as the Voreth's forward hull glowed hot from the railgun impacts, its weapon mounts on the port side disabled, smoke pouring from its damaged launchers. The rest of the human fleet had fallen into formation behind the Aegis, their batteries lighting up the Voreth's exposed flanks, the dreadnought's escorts too scattered to intercept. "Gunnery, target their core access hatches," Voss said, his voice cutting through the alarms. "Don't let them recharge that spinal mount. Helm, keep us in knife range. We don't pull back until that ship's dead." Kowalski laughed, sharp and brutal over the comms. "You got it, Captain. Railguns reloading, point defense set to pick off any corvettes that get too close. This son of a bitch is going down." The Voreth fired again, a weaker salvo from its secondary batteries that bounced harmlessly off the Aegis's flickering forward shields. Voss watched the tactical display, the Voreth's hull integrity dropping by 12% with every salvo from the human fleet. The hegemony had thought brute force, superior numbers, would break humanity. They'd forgotten that humans didn't fight by the rules. They fought to win, no matter the cost. The next volley from the Aegis's railguns slammed into the Voreth's forward hull, punching through the damaged armor, sending a plume of superheated gas and debris spiraling out into the void. The dreadnought shuddered, its engines sputtering, the violet glow of its spinal mount fading as its power core took a hit. Hull integrity at 38% and dropping, the tactical officer called out, a grin breaking across his face. Their escorts are breaking formation, Captain. They're running. Voss held up a hand, his eyes fixed on the Voreth's crippled hull. No pursuit. Focus all fire on disabling their engines. We take this ship intact. Intel says they have the coordinates to the Hegemony supply depot in the Alpha Centauri system. We need that data. The Aegis's batteries kept firing, each shot ringing out like a hammer blow against the Voreth's failing shields. The void around them burned with the light of the laser Inferno, the smell of ozone and burning metal thick in the air. Somewhere in the distance, a human destroyer took a hit, venting atmosphere, but the fleet didn't break. They kept firing, relentless, unyielding, the Voreth's arrogant hull crumbling under the weight of human fury. The low thrum of the Aegis's railgun cooldown cycles vibrated through the deck plating, carrying the sharp, metallic tang of overheated coils and the faint, acrid bite of ozone from the last salvo. On the main tactical display, the Voreth's crippled hull glowed cherry red along the impact zones, its once gleaming violet hegemony insignia scorched black along the forward dorsal plating. USS Halsey reports engineering is sealed, casualty count at 12, no critical damage. They're back in the firing line, Lieutenant Reyes called, his fingers flying across his console as he locked new firing solutions onto the dreadnought's port engine nacelle. Hull integrity holding at 38%, dropping 1% every 90 seconds. Their escorts are scattering, Captain, 3 light frigates breaking for the edge of the engagement zone, no weapons lock on us. Voss held his position at the tactical view, his jaw tight. No pursuit, hold fire on their drives, only disable. We need that data intact. The words had barely left his mouth when the comms officer, Ensign Carter, leaned forward, her brow furrowed. Incoming tight beam hail, Voreth priority frequency, encrypted for direct bridge-to-bridge comms. They're requesting a channel. Put it through, Voss ordered, leaning back in his chair. The main viewscreen flickered, resolving into the face of Voreth warlord Kael'thas, his iridescent dark blue scales flushed angry indigo. A streak of copper blood dried along his jaw from the earlier railgun impact. His bridge was dim, emergency lighting casting long shadows over cracked viewports and sparking consoles behind him. Human Captain, Kael'thas rumbled, his translator sharp with contempt. Another salvo, and I trigger the core overload sequence. The blast radius will take out your destroyer, your frigate screen, and my own ship. The supply depot coordinates you seek are stored in a separate encrypted drive, inaccessible to my crew. If I die, the purge sequence activates, and you'll never find the depot before the hegemony reinforces it. Voss didn't move. You're lying, your core is already breached, Warlord. My engineering team is already in your forward engineering bay, stabilizing the reaction. You trigger that overload, you kill your own crew before you scratch my hull. Kael'thas' eyes narrowed, his gaze darting off screen for half a second before the transmission cut out abruptly. The Voreth's point defense turrets swiveled mid-turn, trailing streaks of red plasma as they targeted the Aegis's forward railgun turrets. A burst of plasma pinged off the forward shields, sending a shower of sparks across the bridge's upper console bank. Point defense is engaging their escorts, Reyes shouted, as 3 small blips resolved on the tactical display, the scattered frigates reversing course, launching a spread of fusion torpedoes at the Aegis. Voreth is attempting to maneuver, port engine still at 30% thrust. They're trying to line up a spinal mount shot, even with the core damaged. Target their point defense emitters, laser batteries only, Voss ordered. Railguns, take out that port engine. Don't destroy the rest of the ship. The Aegis's laser batteries swiveled, laying down a continuous stream of coherent blue light that picked off the Voreth's portside turrets one by one, sending plumes of molten metal spiraling into the void. The railgun salvo followed a second later, slamming directly into the port engine nacelle and blowing it clean off in a burst of white-hot plasma. The Voreth lurched hard to starboard, the faint violet glow of its spinal mount flickering once before dying completely. The dreadnought went dead in the void, only the dim emergency lighting of its hull visible against the burning laser Inferno of the ongoing fleet fight. Nightshade reports breach successful, Carter called, relief evident in her voice. Secure drive extracted, team is exfiltrating now, hull integrity down to 22%. Before she could finish, the Aegis rocked hard to starboard, a klaxon blaring across the bridge as red emergency lighting bathed the room. One of the incoming torpedoes had slipped past the point defense, slamming into the starboard armor plating 3 decks below the bridge. Starboard armor compromised, minor hull breach in Deck 7, the damage control officer reported, his voice steady over the comms. Engineering is rerouting power to forward shields, no critical systems damaged. Ray's fingers flew across his console, locking onto the two remaining escort frigates. Incoming plasma fire from the frigate screen, Captain. They're pushing in close, trying to draw our fire away from the Vorath. Voss leaned forward, his voice cold as the void outside. Target their weapons and engine mounts, disable them. Hold fire on the Vorath until the nightshade is clear. We don't throw away the wind for a bunch of rabid dogs. Ray's thumbs flew across his weapons console, crosshairs snapping to the lead escort frigate's forward cannon bank before locking onto its port thruster cluster. Aye, Captain. Firing solution locked, engaging now. Two bursts of superheated plasma lanced out from the Aegis's secondary battery turrets, slamming into the frigate's flank. The first hit sparked a cascade of ruptured coolant lines along the vessel's spine. The second sheared half the thruster assembly clean off. The frigate spun wildly, its plasma fire cutting out entirely as it drifted toward a debris field of shattered destroyer hull plating. The second escort didn't break. It adjusted course hard to port, skimming the edge of the Aegis's forward shield bubble, and unleashed a spread of 6 plasma torpedoes straight for the ship's port hangar bay. Point defense intercept, Carter barked, her fingers flying across her own console. The Aegis's CIWS turrets swiveled, tracers of flechette fire stitching the void between the two ships. 4 torpedoes detonated mid-flight in showers of orange sparks, but 2 slipped through. One slammed into the forward sensor array mounted above the bridge, blowing the dome apart in a shower of glass-infused circuitry. The other pinged off the reinforced hangar bay shielding with a dull clang that vibrated through the deck plates. Forward sensor array offline, rerouting to secondary dorsal feed, the damage control officer reported, his voice flat over the comms, no trace of alarm. Hangar shielding holding no hull breach, forward shields down to 62%. Before Voss could respond, Carter's headset crackled. Captain, Nightshade comms, they're pinned in the Vorath's secondary corridor, 2 deck markers behind their extraction airlock. Vorath's security team has them behind a bulkhead taking plasma fire. Team medic reports 1 casualty, shrapnel to the shoulder, stable. Voss's jaw tightened. Raise, adjust fire. Target the corridor directly aft of Nightshade's position, 2-meter wide burst, maximum heat. Scorch the bulkhead, take out the hostiles. Don't let them get a shot at the team. Aye, sir. Raise tweaked his targeting solution, the crosshairs shifting to a narrow section of the Vorath's damaged hull. The Aegis's forward plasma cannon fired a single, focused burst, the beam slicing through 3 decks of the dead dreadnought's interior. A faint plume of atmosphere and molten metal vented from the hull, and Carter's headset chirped a second later. Nightshade here, hostiles neutralized. We're through the airlock, docking in 90 seconds. Drive casing is secured, no damage to the asset. Fleet Command's priority channel chimed before Voss could reply, the Admiral's gravelly voice filling the bridge. Aegis Task Force 7 has broken the Vorath left flank. Enemy heavy cruiser is retreating on Vector 045, no pursuit authorized. Hold your position, secure the extracted drive asset. All other hostile contacts are being engaged by screening forces. Voss nodded to himself, eyes fixed on the tactical display. The remaining escort frigate, still drifting with a crippled engine, was trying to align its spinal mount with the disabled Vorath dreadnought's bridge, likely intending to finish the alien crew before they could activate the dreadnought's self-destruct. Raise, target that frigate's reactor core, Voss ordered. Low-yield shot, disable it, don't destroy it. We'll haul it in for intel once the fleet clears the sector. Raise fired, a thin plasma bolt striking the frigate's engineering hull. The vessel's lights flickered and died, its weapons going silent as it drifted, dead in the void. Nightshade is docked, pressure equalized, Carter reported, a hint of relief breaking through her usual calm. Boarding team is moving the drive to the secure armory now. All flight decks are clear for recovery operations. Good, Voss said, leaning back in his command chair for the first time since the fight began. Damage control, get a team on the sensor array. We need full coverage before the next wave hits. Send a Marine squad to the captured frigate, secure the crew if any are still alive. We've got the asset, now we hold the line. The bridge's low hum shattered before Jensen's sharp call cut through the air, his headset askew as he worked to recalibrate the fried sensor array. Unscheduled jump signature, port flank 12,000 clicks, bogies multiple, closing at 0.2 C. Must have been hiding in the nebula's ion storm, the array glitched right over them. Voss didn't rise from his command chair. His eyes flicked to the tactical display, where 3 red carrier icons materialized alongside a swarm of 12 smaller strike fighter blips, no capital escorts visible yet. Jensen, how's the array repair coming? He asked, not taking his eyes off the incoming contacts. Patch job, sir. Full coverage in 10 minutes, but I'm picking up faint jump signatures off the main fleet's flank. Could be more Vorath reinforcements hiding in the ion storm, Jensen replied, his fingers flying across his console to pull up IFF tags. Confirmed Vorath 3rd Fleet. They used the interference to drop out of warp undetected. ETA to weapons range, 8 minutes. Shields to maximum, point defense batteries power up, Voss ordered, his voice unchanged from the last engagement. Prioritize strike fighters, ignore the carriers until they move into range. Nightshade, cut docking clamps, fall in behind our port bow. Do not jettison the extracted drive asset under any circumstances. Carter's response came tight, no trace of the earlier relief in her tone. Copy, clamps released, moving to defensive position. ETA 90 seconds. Drive asset is secured in the forward armory, marine escort posted. Before Voss could reply, Hale's crackling comms signal cut in, the background noise of clanging metal and whining life support alarms bleeding through. Command, Corporal Hale, captured frigate. Engineering team reports the reactor disable shot didn't breach the core, but life support is failing fast. Got 3 Vorath survivors in the escape pod bay, 1 junior tactical officer, 2 engineering crew. No sign of the Dreadnought's senior staff. They bilayed before we took out the frigate's weapons. Any intel on the Dreadnought self-destruct? Voss asked. A beat of silence, then Hale's voice dropped. Negative, sir, but our damage control team found a hardwired Deadman switch in the Dreadnought's engineering bay, tied to the main antimatter stores. It's not linked to the bridge controls we disabled. Tamper trigger is active. Any unauthorized attempt to bypass it sets it off immediately. Timer started when the Dreadnought lost bridge power, 22 minutes left on the clock. Voss's jaw tightened. He pulled up the Dreadnought schematics, zooming in on the engineering bay. Rays, can you take out the trigger junction without tripping the tamper or damaging the antimatter core? Rays didn't look up from his weapons console, his fingers already adjusting firing solutions. Low-yield plasma bolt, pinpoint shot to the junction box next to the trigger. Won't damage the core, won't set off the tamper. But I need a clear firing lane. Vorath strike fighters are launching from their carriers. First wave will be on us in 2 minutes. As if on cue, the tactical display lit up with a swarm of red icons breaking away from the carrier blips. The Aegis's point defense batteries opened fire first, streaks of tungsten tracers stitching across the void, picking off the lead fighters before they could get within weapons range. One slipped through, slamming into the port shield generator. The bridge lurched, alarms blared as the shield reading dropped to 62%. Nightshade's own batteries opened up a second later, its smaller frame darting into position behind the Aegis's port bow, picking off the fighters that broke through the first screen. Hale's voice came back over comms, sharper this time. Sir, the Vorath tactical officer we captured just gave us more intel. Those 3 carriers are a distraction. Main Vorath battle fleet is jumping into the sector in 10 minutes, 12 capital ships, enough to wipe out the entire task force. He says the Deadman switch on the Dreadnought is rigged to send a signal to that fleet the second it blows, marking our position for a full orbital strike. Voss stared at the tactical display, the red icons of the incoming fighters swelling, the countdown to the Dreadnought's self-destruct ticking down in the corner of his screen. He keyed the comms to the entire crew, his voice steady, no trace of the tension coiling in his chest. All hands, battle stations. Damage control, get that port shield generator back online. Rays, you have a firing lane in 90 seconds, take the shot. Hale, get the prisoner to the brig, keep him sedated if you have to. We hold this position until the drive asset is secured, and we take that Dreadnought intact. No one dies today if I have anything to do with it. The void between the 3 Vorath carrier battle groups and the UNSC Aegis crackled with plasma tracers and detonating missile warheads, the Nightshade's point defense batteries stitching red lines through the remaining swarm of enemy fighters. The Aegis's port shields, restored to 78% by the damage control team's frantic work, flared each time a stray plasma round slammed into the barrier, the ship's inertial dampeners groaning under the impact. On the bridge tactical display, the countdown to the Vorath main fleet's scheduled jump ticked down from 9 minutes 47 seconds, the red icon of the crippled Vorath Dreadnought pulsing in the center of the sector, its self-destruct timer counting backward from 2 minutes 12 seconds. 3 decks below, Petty Officer Jara Mendez pried a shard of fighter wreckage out of the port shield generator's primary coupling, her vac suit's HUD flickering with intermittent power loss from the nearby conduit fire. The smell of burnt insulation and ozone coated the back of her throat, her gloves slick with coolant that leaked from a severed line 10 feet away. Control, this is Mendez, couplings cleared, resetting flow now, she barked into her comms, her voice tight as she watched the generator's output climb from 62% to 78% in 3 seconds. A chunk of molten bulkhead pinged off her shoulder plate and she didn't flinch. She'd lost her entire squad on the Proxima outpost when a Vorath fighter rammed their corvette's engineering bay. This generator was personal. Voss didn't take his eyes off the tactical display as the second Voreth carrier swung its forward plasma batteries around to bear on the Aegis's weakened port side. Raise, firing lane on that carrier's missile bays is open in 20 seconds. Take it out before it can launch another wave of fighters. Ray's fingers flew across his weapons console, the Aegis's railgun batteries swiveling to match the carrier's slow turn. Locked, sir. 3 rounds loaded, firing on your mark. Hale's voice cut through the bridge chatter, sharp and strained. Sir, the prisoner's awake. He says the main fleet jumped early. They're already 30 seconds into their transit, ETA 7 minutes, not 10. Also, the Dreadnought's Deadman switch just tripped. Self-destruct is down to 1 minute 45 seconds. Voss's jaw tightened, but his voice didn't waver when he keyed the all-crew comms again. All hands, brace for impact. Nightshade, draw fire from that second carrier. We need a clear lane for the boarding team. Rays fired, the 3 railgun rounds streaking across the void, 2 shot down by the carrier's point defense, the third slamming into the carrier's forward missile bay. The explosion bloomed white and bright, the carrier's bow shearing off in a shower of debris, its fighter-launched tubes going dark. On the Nightshade's bridge, LT, Kale yanked his light frigate into a hard turn, his thrusters burning hot as he weaved through the debris field from the destroyed carrier. I've got a lock on the Dreadnought's point defense turrets, sir. 4 shots, I can take them out in 30 seconds, give the boarding team a clear path to the docking bay. Hale nodded, tapping his comms to the 6-man boarding team huddled in the aft EVA bay. You've got 30 seconds. Disable the Deadman switch, secure the FTL core, don't engage any hostiles unless you have to. Move. The Aegis rolled to port, placing itself between the crippled Dreadnought and the 3rd remaining Voreth carrier, its forward batteries opening fire to suppress the carrier's targeting systems. The Dreadnought's self-destruct timer hit 1 minute as the boarding team's EVA thrusters fired, sending them drifting across the gap toward the Dreadnought's crippled port docking bay. Long-range sensors pinged, the first of the Voreth main fleet's capital ships dropping out of jump 8 minutes out, their forward batteries already charging. Somewhere on the Dreadnought's bridge, a Voreth tactical officer slammed his fist on the console, screaming for his crew to target the human boarding craft before they could reach the Deadman switch. Chapter 10, Inferno. Corridor. The Nightshade's hull shuddered as Kale's frigate skimmed past the wreckage of the carrier, its plating scorched by stray plasma bursts. On the tactical display, the Voreth Dreadnought loomed like a wounded predator, its docking bay torn open, its self-destruct countdown ticking mercilessly towards 0. 30 seconds, Hale's voice cut through the bridge noise, calm but edged with steel. Kale, suppress those turrets, boarding team, you're green. Kale's fingers danced across the controls, locking onto the Dreadnought's point defense clusters. Firing, 4 precision beams lanced out, each strike carving through hardened alloy. The turrets sputtered, their targeting arrays collapsing in showers of sparks. On the EVA channel, Sergeant Rin's voice was clipped, professional. Turrets neutralized, we're crossing. The 6-man team drifted across the void, thrusters firing in short bursts, their armored silhouettes stark against the inferno of burning debris. The Voreth bridge was chaos. Officers barked orders in guttural tones, their arrogance cracking under the realization that humans had breached their perimeter. A tactical officer slammed his clawed hand against the console. Target the intruders, fire everything. But the Dreadnought systems were crippled, its weapons cycling sluggishly, its reactor bleeding power into the void. On the Aegis, Captain Hale watched the timer tick down, 45 seconds. The Voreth carrier to starboard was maneuvering, its forward batteries charging for a strike that would gut the Aegis if left unchecked. Hale's voice was steady. Helm, roll us 30 degrees. Weapons, suppress that carrier. Keep them blind. The Aegis's forward cannons roared, streams of coherent light hammering into the carrier's sensor arrays. Explosions rippled across its hull, blinding its targeting systems. The carrier staggered, its return fire scattering harmlessly into the void. Inside the Dreadnought's docking bay, Rin's team cut through twisted metal, forcing their way into the corridor beyond. The air was thick with smoke, the walls trembling with each external impact. Deadman switches forward 2 decks up, Rin snapped. Move, Private Juno keyed her scanner. Multiple hostiles ahead, they're setting up a barricade. Rin's jaw tightened, bypass if possible. We're not here to fight, but the Voreth soldiers were already advancing, their weapons glowing with lethal charge. The humans moved with terrifying calm, their formation tight, their movements precise. Juno lobbed a flash charge down the corridor. The detonation blinded the Voreth, giving the team the seconds they needed to slip past. On the Nightshade, Kale's sensors screamed. Sir, long-range contacts, the Voreth main fleet, capital ships dropping out of jump, 8 minutes until engagement. Hale's eyes narrowed. Then we hold this corridor for 8 minutes. If they get that FTL core, we can cripple their reinforcements before they arrive. The Dreadnought's countdown hit 30 seconds. Rin's team reached the control chamber. The Deadman switch pulsed ominously, its interface locked behind Vorath encryption. Corporal Vey dropped to one knee, his gauntlet interfacing with the console. I can crack it, 20 seconds. Make it 10, Rin growled. Outside, the Vorath carrier rallied, its batteries firing in a desperate salvo. The Aegis absorbed the hits, its shields flaring, but the strain was visible. Hale's knuckles whitened on the armrest. Kale, buy us time. Kale's frigate darted through the Inferno, weaving between wreckage and plasma fire. He lined up a shot on the carrier's reactor vents. Firing, the beam struck true, rupturing the vent. The carrier's systems cascaded into overload, its weapons falling silent. On the dreadnought, Vey's voice was urgent. Encryption cracked, disarming. His gauntlet pulsed, the Deadman switch's timer freezing at 12 seconds. The chamber lights flickered, then steadied. FTL core secured, Rin reported. Relief was fleeting. Vorath reinforcements were closing in, their boots pounding the deck. Extraction route, Hale demanded. Blocked, Rin replied. We'll need a hot pickup. Hale's decision was instant. Kale, swing Nightshade to docking bay, cover their retreat. Aegis will hold the line. Kale's frigate burned hard, thrusters flaring as it dove toward the dreadnought's docking bay. Vorath fighters swarmed, desperate to intercept. Kale's guns spat fire, shredding the first wave, weaving through the rest with ruthless precision. The boarding team burst back into the docking bay, Vorath soldiers on their heels. Rin's rifle barked, cutting down the closest pursuers. Nightshade, we're here. The frigate's bay doors opened, its grappling arms extending. The team leapt across the gap, thrusters firing, slamming into the docking clamps just as the Vorath unleashed a final barrage. Kale's frigate rolled, shields flaring, dragging the boarding team clear. We've got them. On the Aegis, Hale watched the Vorath fleet signatures grow closer, their capital ships emerging from jump space like leviathans. His voice was calm, resolute. All ships form up. We bought our window, now we use it. The humans had secured the dreadnought's core, but the battle was far from over. The corridor of fire stretched ahead, and the Vorath main fleet was coming. The Inferno was only beginning. The Aegis's hull thrummed as Vorath capital ships bled out of jump space, their jagged, obsidian hulls glinting against the starfield. On the bridge, tactical LT. Javi's fingers flew across her console, voice sharp over the hum of systems. 3 Dominion dreadnoughts, 7 cruisers, 12 destroyers. Flagship Vorath's Wrath leading, lance arrays charging. Firing solution in 45 seconds. Hale stood at the command pit, blood trickling from a shallow cut on his forehead from the earlier boarding skirmish, his jaw tight. Aegis lay suppressing fire on the lead dreadnought. Point defense, prioritize incoming fighter swarms. Hail the captured Dominion vessel. The comms crackled and Commander Voss's voice came through, staticky but steady. He led the skeleton crew of Vorath defectors and human boarders holding the captured dreadnought, now redesignated USS Void Reaper. Spinal Lance 80% charged, Captain. They've marked us as priority target, port shield already down 40%. Divert power from non-essential systems to keep that lance charging, Hale ordered. Hold position until firing solution is locked. The first salvo hit a second later. Vorath heavy lances slammed into the Aegis's forward shields, flaring bright gold as the barrier absorbed the impact, dropping shield strength to 68%. Human destroyers returned fire, railgun salvos punching through the shields of a Vorath cruiser, detonating its reactor core in a burst of orange flame. A swarm of Vorath fighters broke for the human frigate line, point defense batteries stitching red tracers across the void, shredding half the wing before the rest veered off. A lance clipped the Aegis's bridge port side, blowing out the view screen and sending shrapnel skittering across the deck. Javi grunted as a shard caught her shoulder, but she didn't leave her post. Vorath's Wrath is targeting the Void Reaper, they're charging a full broadside. On the Void Reaper's bridge, Weapons Chief Mara barked orders as sparks showered from her console. Port turrets gone, 12 casualties in the mess hall. Lance charges at 92%, we can hold it if we dump the last of the port shield power. Do it, Voss ordered, eyes fixed on the tactical display showing the Vorath flagship's weapons locking onto their hull. Target the Wrath's command tower when the charge tops out. Just as the Reaper's lance hummed to full power, the comms crackled with the Vorath flagship's transmission. Thalkosh's sneering, guttural voice filled the bridge. Humans. You steal Dominion property, spill Vorath blood, you will be erased, your fleet turned to dust, your homeworld burned as an example. Hale cut the transmission without a word, his jaw tight. Fire. The Void Reaper's spinal lance slashed across the void, punching through the Vorath's Wrath's forward shields and slicing clean through its command tower. The flagship went dark, drifting slowly out of formation, its remaining guns silent. The other 2 Vorath dreadnoughts roared in fury, redirecting every weapon they had at the Void Reaper, lances hammering its already damaged hull. Void Reaper is taking heavy damage, Javi called, her voice tight with pain. Shields down to 20%, hull integrity at 55%. Hale's jaw tightened. Kale, Nightshade, intercept the two destroyers breaking off to finish the Reaper. Aegis will cover you. Kale's voice came through, calm and unshaken, the thrum of Nightshade's thrusters audible in the background. Copy Aegis. ETA 30 seconds to intercept. Rin's manning the forward railguns will make short work of them. Nightshade rolled hard, dodging a lance blast from the lead destroyer, and fired a spread of plasma torpedoes that slammed into the enemy's engine block, sending it spiraling out of control. Rin's railgun shot took out the second destroyer's sensor array, leaving it blind and vulnerable to Aegis's follow-up fire. Before Hale could order the next strike, the comms blared with a proximity alert. 20 heavy Dominion bombers, 40 fighter escorts breaking for the Indomitable, Javi reported, her face pale. ETA 90 seconds to weapons range. The Aegis's point defense batteries were already fully engaged with the remaining Vorath capital ships, no guns free to pivot to the carrier's defense. Hale opened a channel to Nightshade. Kale, can you intercept the bomber wing? We're 10 seconds clear of the destroyer engagement, Kale replied, already banking the frigate toward the bomber vector. Rin's team has anti-fighter payloads prepped. They'll handle the escorts. Give me a clear shot at the bombers. Copy. Rin's voice cut in, crisp and steady. My team's already on the external gun stations. We'll keep the fighters off your tail. Hale watched the tactical display, the Vorath bombers growing closer by the second, the Void Reaper still holding out under relentless fire, the Aegis's shields flickering as another salvo hit. He keyed the fleet-wide comms, his voice cold and resolute. All hands, brace for impact. We hold the line or we burn. Chapter 12, Episode 19. Shattered Horizons, relentless capital ships locked in a deadly laser inferno. ASF, the tactical grid bloomed with hostile vectors, crimson icons converging on the Indomitable like a swarm of knives. Hale's jaw tightened as the Dominion bombers accelerated, their escorts weaving a protective lattice of intercept fire. The Aegis's hull shuddered under another capital beam strike, sparks cascading across the bridge as systems fought to stabilize. Point defense saturation at 98%, Javi reported, voice clipped. We can't peel anything off for the carrier. Hale's eyes flicked to the Indomitable's silhouette, massive, vulnerable, the fleet's lifeline. If it fell, the human's tenuous line would collapse. He keyed the command channel. Nightshade, you're clear, cut them down. Kale's frigate surged forward, thrusters burning white-hot. The Nightshade's hull rolled into the bomber formation, its profile vanishing behind a storm of evasive maneuvers. Rin's gunners opened fire, streams of flak and micro-missiles carving into the fighter screen. Explosions peppered the void, Dominion interceptors spiraling apart as their formation fractured. Escort wing breaking, Rin confirmed, her tone calm, surgical. We've got lanes opening. Kale's voice followed, low and deliberate, targeting bomber cores, locking torpedoes. The frigate's launch bays spat a ripple of plasma warheads. They streaked into the bomber wedge, detonating in blinding bursts. 2 Dominion heavies disintegrated instantly, their payloads erupting prematurely in a chain reaction that shredded nearby escorts. On the Aegis, Hale's display updated, enemy numbers dropping, but not fast enough. 17 bombers still inbound, Javi warned. They'll breach carrier range in 30 seconds. Hale's hand slammed the console. Redirect rail batteries. Forget the Vorath cruiser, hit those bombers. Sir, that leaves the cruiser free to do it. Hale's voice cut like steel. The carrier lives or none of us do. The Aegis's massive railguns pivoted, firing slugs the size of shuttles into the bomber formation. 3 more enemy craft vanished in incandescent bursts, their armor no match for kinetic fury. The Vorath cruiser seized the opening, its beam cannons lancing into the Aegis's flank. Shields collapsed, plating buckled, alarms screamed. Hale gritted his teeth, refusing to flinch. Damage control, seal decks 12 through 15, keep us fighting. The Void Reaper, battered but unbroken, swung into the cruiser's path. Its captain's voice crackled over comms, ragged but resolute. We'll hold them, finish the bombers. The Reaper's guns roared, trading fire with the Vorath Leviathan. Hull plating peeled away under the assault, but the human ship refused to yield, its defiance buying precious seconds. Kale's frigate dove through the bomber formation, guns blazing. 6 down, he reported, voice steady despite the chaos, but they're locking on the carrier. Rin's team fired another spread, shredding 2 more. The bomber count dropped to 9. Indomitable's shields at 40%, Javi called. They won't last another run. Hale's eyes narrowed. Kale, break formation. Ram them if you have to. There was no hesitation. Acknowledged. The Nightshade accelerated, thrusters screaming as Kale angled the frigate directly into the bomber wedge. Plasma fire raked across its hull, tearing armor away, but the frigate held course. Brace, Kale ordered his crew. Impact in 5. The Nightshade slammed into the lead bomber, tearing it apart in a catastrophic collision. The shockwave engulfed 2 more, detonating their payloads prematurely. The frigate spun out of control, hull aflame, but Kale's voice still cut through the comms. Remaining bombers scattered, finished them. The Aegis's railguns fired again, obliterating the survivors. The last Dominion bomber vanished in a burst of molten debris. Silence fell across the tactical grid, no more inbound threats. On the Indomitable's bridge, cheers erupted, raw relief flooding the crew. Hale allowed himself a single breath, then keyed the channel. Kale, status, static answered, then faint, broken words. Nightshade crippled, hull breach, but we're alive. Rin's voice followed, firm despite exhaustion. We'll hold until recovery, don't waste the victory. The Vorath cruiser, realizing its bomber wing was annihilated, began to retreat. Its arrogance shattered, its beams faltered, and the Void Reaper's guns tore into its engines. The alien Leviathan limped away, bleeding fire into the void. Hale stood tall, voice carrying across the fleet. We held, against their arrogance, against their numbers, we held, and will keep holding until they break. The tactical grid cleared, Dominion forces scattering. The humans, battered but unbowed, remained. In the silence that followed, Hale looked at the wreckage of Nightshade drifting among the stars. Sacrifice had bought survival. Calm resolve had beaten arrogance. The war was far from over, but tonight, humanity had proved it could endure the Inferno, and the Vorath would never forget the cost of underestimating them. Word count, ~940.